In this video, I'm gonna walk you through exactly how to break into remote high ticket sales in 2026. Maybe you're like I was a couple years ago. You're stuck in a dead end 9 to 5 job or a sales position that doesn't match your true potential. You're tired of the long hours, being stuck in an office, and not making as much as you like. And you'd like to be able to get into high ticket sales so you can make more money, travel the world or work from home or wherever you want, and be able to finally have control over your calendar. Well, if that's you, then you're in great fortune because 4 years ago, I got into the high ticket sales space with no experience coming from car sales. And literally within my first 36 months, I took home $1.5 million in straight commissions. And now I help in person sales reps and people leave their jobs to transition into remote high ticket sales through our placement network and our skill training program, which is called High Ticket Dominance. And you can find out more below about that if you click the link in the description. But let's go ahead and dive into the video. So, to me, when it comes to breaking into high ticket sales, it's a simple step-by-step process, and it's only 3 steps, right? Now, number 1 is skill development, okay? And there's a couple myths that are really common that I want to dispel right here, right now, okay? So the first myth is this, right? You see, a lot of closers, what they do is they'll reach out to high ticket companies and say, hey, I want to work for you. I come from this industry and, I'm hungry, I'm coachable. And if you just hire me and train me, I'll be a killer, right? And I want you to avoid fooling yourself into thinking that that is, what actually is attractive to a high ticket company. You see, nowadays, there's so much sales training out there, right? There's so many people out there that provide high ticket sales training that the people that you're paired against when you go to apply for a really good position are also coachable and hungry and things like that, except for they've already paid money to learn from, a proper coach about high ticket sales. They've already learned the high ticket sales process before they're even applying to these jobs. And, if I'm a recruiter, you got to look at everything from a recruiter's lens. And I'm looking at 2 people that apply and both say they're hungry and coachable. Yet one took it upon his own will to go out and invest and learn high ticket sales before even trying to get into the industry. And the other person just says, I don't know anything about high ticket sales or the sales process, but I'll learn. I've watched a couple YouTube videos. Who do you think is more likely to get results? The person who's invested already and got professional training, right? So it's important to develop the skill first. The second myth is this, right? People think that because they have a background in sales in a different industry, it'll transfer right over to high ticket. And that's not necessarily true. You see, all the time I get guys that DM me that are like, hey man, I've been selling whatever, loans or cars or houses, whatever, for X amount of years. I'd be great in high ticket sales. And the amount of people I've seen try to get into the industry without getting proper training first and fail miserably because of the lack of how much that skill actually transfers over is astonishing. So no matter how skilled you are, no matter how long you've been doing sales, yes, all sales are the same in a way, but you're still going to want to get specific high ticket sales training before you apply for a job for both of those reasons I just mentioned, okay? So let's talk about skill development and how to properly do it. So, to me, I basically break down skill into 2 things. You need 2 types of learning to get really good at something. You need passive learning and you need active learning, okay? Now, here's how I like to look at this, right? Passive learning is YouTube videos, courses, books, etc. Okay. And it certainly plays a role in you getting really good at something, right? Because before you can master it, before you practice something, you need to consume it, you need to put it into your brain. Okay. You need to learn specific things about getting into high ticket sales. You need to learn how to find the right companies and how to vet them properly. You need to learn how to apply and interview and land a position that's really good. You need to learn the high ticket sales process, follow-up methods, how to do your admin work, objection handling skills. There's a lot of stuff you need to learn. So definitely do some passive learning and studying, but also understand this, right? This is what's really important for you to understand. And that is that active learning is where you're really going to want support, right? Because there's a big difference between understanding something and actually being able to do it. And my favorite way to break this down is to think about golf, for example. So for a while, I wanted to get into golf, right? I thought it was kind of cool. I figured it'd be a good way for me to spend some time with clients. So I took a couple classes, right? And I still suck at golf. I actually don't take those classes anymore because that shit takes a lot of time and effort to learn, right? That I don't want to, quite frankly, don't want to invest into learning at this time in my life. I'm too locked in with work and other things that I'm doing, right? But when I was trying to learn golf, what I learned was this. You could watch the PGA Tour for hours and hours and put in 10,000 hours of consuming golf content, okay? But when you go out there and you put a club in your hands, there's a million things you're trying to focus on at once. Your hand placement, your eyes, your hips, your ankles, everything, right? And I was having to constantly iterate. The coach was like, hey, do this, do that, do this, do that, 1,000 times over and over again. And that's exactly how sales is. And that's why you need active training before you even apply for a job too, in order to properly develop your skills. Because when you're on a high ticket sales call, you've got to be worried about your own words you're saying and the questions you're asking, the way you're asking them, when you're asking them. And on top of that, you got to be paying attention to your prospect, okay? Not just the words they're saying, but the way they're saying them, their subcommunication and things like that. There's so much going on that you can't just expect to start taking calls out of nowhere with no training and just immediately pick it up. It takes a while, right? I run a high ticket closing group, right, where I coach people that are coming from in-person industries that are honestly pretty talented. They have a lot of raw skill, and they still struggle to really run a high ticket closing call at the highest level, even if they have years of sales experience and quite a bit of raw skill. Okay. Now, when it comes to active learning, there's a couple important things that you need to really get a lot of reps in on. Okay. And the way I'm going to explain this is you need to understand the high ticket sales process. So I'm going to give you a little bit of sauce here, right? Now, I have closed over 8 figures in high ticket sales deals over my career. And I've only ever followed a simple 5-step process, right? And it breaks down like this. You've got the intro, the discovery, the transition, okay? And then you've got the pitch, and finally you have the close, okay? Now, obviously inside of my coaching program, I go much more in depth into how to execute each of these 5 steps in very specific detail. But it's really as simple as this 5 steps, okay? And people will try to complicate it and put their own spin on it and give it fancy names, but this is essentially the process that I teach, right? Now, intro obviously is where you're starting up the call, introducing yourself, building a little bit of rapport. The discovery is the portion of the call where you're asking questions and building the gap. More on that later. The transition is where you're going from asking questions to now getting into the pitch, letting the prospect know you can help them and that you would like to, show them that your solution and how it works. The pitch is obviously where you're explaining your program, getting them bought in on the process, and finally the close where you're asking for the dollars, right? Now, what's really important for you to understand is there's 2 specific areas where you're going to want a lot of reps, because this is where you're most likely to drop the ball, make mistakes, etc., right? And ultimately, these 2 areas are what separate good reps from great reps, okay? Being able to execute these 2 parts of the call. Number 1 is going to be discovery, okay? So for discovery, it's important to understand, I mentioned earlier building the gap, okay? So what is the gap, right? Well, the gap is simple, okay? When you're talking to somebody in high ticket sales, they are at point A and they want to get over to point B, okay? And that is all you're trying to help them do by selling them your program. Your program is what we call the bridge between where they're at and where they want to go, okay? That's what you're selling, is the transformation, okay? The alleviation of pain that's going to happen when they move from point A to point B, and how they're going to get all these hopes, dreams, desires, and things like that they've always wanted, right? So during this discovery, what's really important is being able to ask the right questions the right way and at the right time. Okay, so that's one of the things that I tell my students inside of my program all the time is, questions, there's 3 things. There's what you ask, when you ask, and how you ask. Okay, and those are all very important. And being able to properly time your questions and execute them the right way, and even knowing what to ask in the first place, is how you execute a proper discovery. Now, because there's so many variables, like a call could go a million different directions, and there's just so many different outcomes that could happen in discovery and different things that could happen. You need a lot of reps, okay? So you can know what to ask, when to ask, and how to ask, and how to ultimately build that gap to where the value of what your service is going to bring to that person's life exceeds the price of whatever your offer is that you're about to pitch, right? So you need a lot of reps in discovery. The second thing you need is a lot of reps in the close. You see, because the close, a couple things happens, right? First of all, you do what's called the price drop, meaning you're going to tell them what your stuff costs, okay? And a lot of reps get scared when they talk about money, and it's nothing to be afraid of. It doesn't bite. It'll dramatically enrich your life if you collect as much as possible of it. So you shouldn't be afraid to talk about money, okay? But a lot of people get nervous on that price drop, so you need a lot of reps and practice. The second thing is objections, right? You definitely want to get good at overcoming objections, okay? So that's super important too. So inside of my program, like I mentioned, We do a lot of reps at overcoming objections. You need to get really good. Specifically, fear objections, okay? Money objections, okay? I don't have the money. Partner objections, and those are really the big three that I see that we practice inside of my group, okay? Now, so really to kind of sum up step one, you need passive learning and you need to learn about the industry, the high ticket closing process and things like that. But then really more importantly, focus on the active learning, okay? I gave you my 5-step process and now you know you need to get a lot of reps, practice and discovery and closing, the price drop and objection handling. Now, one last thing here before we move on. You want to be really careful who you role play with. And that actually brings me to my last point here is role play is the best way to develop your skill as a high ticket closer. Inside of my program, we literally do 4 calls a week that are 2 to 3 hours in length doing role play. And I'm hypercritical of all my students as they execute, helping them ask the right questions at the right time, the right way, right? And again, as I mentioned earlier, even I see tons of talented reps come through my program that have tons of sales experience that still struggle, and there's still a lot of room for improvement, right? Now, when you do role play, what's really important is that you're gonna wanna practice with somebody who's where you wanna be, right? Because it doesn't help to practice golf. Like I wouldn't get golf lessons from my grandmother, even if she had studied golf a lot, if she's never swung a golf club before, right? You're gonna wanna have the right person giving you the right feedback, right? That's the key to success, okay? Now we're moving on from here. So again, passive learning, active learning. I gave you my 5-step process, role play discovery a lot, role play, closing and objection handling, and make sure you do it with the right person, okay? On to step 2. Step 2 is applying and landing roles, okay? Now, here's what's really important to understand here, okay? There's essentially a 4-step process that I teach all my students inside of my program, and you need to learn how to find, vet, apply, and interview for great companies. That is the 4-step process I teach my students. Now, finding opportunities in high ticket sales is fairly simple. You can go to what's called Meta Ads Library, okay? If you've never heard of Meta Ads Library before, you should certainly look it up. You can essentially go and look up any advertiser on Facebook or Instagram and see all their active advertisements. This is a good place to go to look for high ticket closing opportunities because if a company's running ads, they're probably getting leads and they're trying to sell a program, product, service, whatever it may be, right? So that's a good place for you to start. You'd also look at Facebook groups. You can search on social media, whether that be IG, YouTube, etc. Right? You can funnel hack people. If they're promoting a program, you'll know, right? They'll be posting value-based content. They'll have links in their bios to, check out like join a free training or learn more, apply to join their program. Like if they have these things, they're doing coaching and they have a high ticket service, right? A high ticket offer. Now, the reason that my group exists is because, finding is cool because if you can find all these companies, you can build a big database. You can put together a Google spreadsheet and find like maybe 30, 40, 50 companies you'd want to work for. And you could outbound DM them and funnel hack them and call them and stuff like that and maybe email them. But like, that's an ineffective strategy compared to the other options you have at your disposal, right? Because like for me, for example, inside of my group, I source and vet all the opportunities for my students. Like we have a job board that gets 500 to 600 postings every single month. And in addition to that, I have opportunities coming from my personal network. I partner with a lot of recruiting companies. So like there's an abundance of them. So you don't have to waste your time, right? There's 2 things in life. You can either spend money to save time or spend time to save money. I'd rather spend money to save time because money is abundant and infinite and time is finite and there's only so much of it. And I want to get the results as quickly as I possibly can, right? But if you want to go find them on your own, just go through one of these things and put them on a Google spreadsheet and then proceed to the next steps. Vetting is simple. You need to understand if you're dealing with a good company. Now, for the purpose of lack of time, I'm going to give you 3 things to vet a company on. You're going to want to vet them on their marketing, you're going to want to vet them on their product, and you're going to want to vet them on their leadership, okay? Because think about it like this, right? If a company has bad marketing, you're going to get really unqualified and uneducated leads, okay? So uneducated leads sucks as a high ticket closer because anybody can run an ad and say, hey, you want to make 10K a month, click the link and DM me, right? But we live in an age where trust is at an all-time low. So people don't buy the way they used to, right? Google ran a study that found out that most consumers need to consume 7 hours of content from a brand before they ever purchase from that brand. So if the company you work for doesn't post YouTube content, Instagram content, and they just run ads and they're just like, hey, DM us to learn how to do XYZ, you're gonna have a really hard time closing those leads. That's considered cold traffic, meaning not a lot of trust. They literally just found your brand, and you're gonna be doing a lot of educating on those calls. It's not gonna be easy closes. People are gonna hang up on you. You're gonna have a lot of pushback because these people don't trust your company, right? So look for companies that post a lot of content. Instagram, YouTube, run a ton of ads, etc., right? Second thing, product. They need to have a good product because your number one asset as a closer is your conviction. Once you lose conviction, you can't sell shit. So you got to have a company that you believe in their product, right? Also make sure you align with the product and you buy it yourself. Like if you're a dude over 40, don't go sell a women's over 40 coaching program because you're not very convicted in that, right? But if you sold like real estate coaching and you're passionate about real estate, you're going to crush it because you're going to be like, dude, this is it, right? Because you believe in it, okay? So make sure they have a good product and good fulfillment too. You never want to sell for a company that has terrible fulfillment because we're selling coaching and consulting after all. And you definitely don't want to be selling a bad coaching program, right? You want to make sure that's probably number one over anything. I'll take a good product over good leadership and good marketing any day, but preferably they have all three. Now, the last thing is leadership, right? Because a lot of companies in high ticket, because of the lack of good leaders in today's world, especially in the high ticket space, they literally think that growing their company is this simple. Turn on ads, hire a closer, and say, go sell some shit. But as a sales rep, you always want to be constantly developing. And the best way to do that is have specific help for your offer. So you need a leader, you need either the owner to directly be coaching you or a sales manager in place. If there's not that, get out of there, don't do it because you're never going to grow. Maybe you can make decent money, but you're not going to get that continual development you get if you had a mentor who is a very high level producer that's coaching you directly on the offer, right? So that's vetting. And then lastly is applying and interviewing. Okay. Now, applying and interviewing, super important. And there's only two things you need to understand when it comes to applying for jobs. So when it comes to applying, it's simple, right? You need two things. You need your resume and your Loom video. And in terms of the order of importance here, the Loom video is everything in 2026 to get a high ticket sales job. So obviously, if you've ever applied for a job before, which if you're watching this video, hopefully you have, you've crafted a resume, right? And it's essentially just your job history, your professional skills, etc., right? Super easy to craft. And there's also AI resume builders out there and stuff like that. You can DM me on Instagram and I'll send you over the tool I give to my students. But that's not really a big deal. Like the resume is like not that important. Okay. It's definitely second priority and it's probably the 2080, the Loom video does most of the work. Now your Loom video, when you go apply for a job is most important. So think about it like this, right? When you go to apply for a high ticket sales role, you're going to have an application link. You're going to fill that bad boy out. They're going to ask you to attach a 1 to 3 minute video of which is a Loom video explaining essentially why you're the right fit for that company. And the goal of these Looms is simple. It's to see if you have a good setup, see how put together you are, kind of get a glimpse into your world. It's to see how well you communicate, okay? And it's to also get an idea of how you are as a person, okay? Whether you're arrogant, energetic, more introverted, etc. And it's kind of crazy, but your Loom video is literally your shot at selling yourself on why you're a good fit for this company, right? So I recruit for some high ticket offers as well, right? And that's what allows me to give my students a lot of insight into how to land these jobs. Like for example, just recently I was recruiting for an offer that I'm the sales manager for. We do about $200,000 a month. I posted this on my Instagram and I got 50 applications. Okay, they all sent me Loom videos. Most of them were absolute trash. They either had people filming with a bed in the background in a messy looking room, or they had terrible energy, or the guys that seemed arrogant. Like I instantly disqualified them, okay? So your Loom video is make or break. So all you need to really understand is that this 1 to 3 minute Loom video needs to be powerful. Be authentic, be yourself, and really learn how to tell your story, okay? It's a skill set to be able to sell yourself and tell your background story in an engaging way, okay? I'm not gonna go into this video on exactly how to script one. I probably will make future content on this, but just start to study the Loom video process. Learn how to use it, download it on your computer. It's literally a video software just like this where you're recording yourself and you need to get good at those. So maybe even start practicing getting good on video and then learn how to script, write it, and send it off, okay? Now, interviewing. Okay, interviewing is different in high ticket sales, and here's why. So the best companies out there, right, in the high ticket sales world have tons and tons of applicants. Because think about it like this, right? Let's say a company's doing $5 million a month, okay? That means that their closers are probably making a ton of money, okay? And on top of that, it's remote, it's secure, and you kind of get to be your own boss, right? So if there's a company out there that pays closers $10,000 to $50,000 a month, and they all get to work remote and they get to be their own boss, everybody wants to work for those companies, right? So these companies typically don't have time to one-on-one interview everybody that applies, okay? So they're typically going to review your Loom video, okay? And if your Loom looks good, you move on to the next phase, which is then going to be a group interview. Now, the reason that this is so important to understand is that these group interviews are very, very fast-paced. So a recruiter will start up an interview. You'll be invited, you'll show up on a Zoom call, there'll be 20 other people, give or take, maybe more, maybe less. They're just gonna rapid fire questions at you. And they're gonna be like, hey, who are you? Tell us your background. Why should we consider you? Who else would you hire on this interview if you had to pick one person besides yourself? What's the difference between a good or great salesperson? And there's many other questions they could ask you, right? One of the things I do inside my program is give my students a exhaustive list of every single group interview question I've ever heard a recruiter ask and how to answer it, right? How to formulate a response. That way you don't get caught off guard, because that's exactly what happens on these interviews is people get flustered and trip over their words and get embarrassed, and it's just a bad time, right? So you want to master the art of running group interviews. You got to show up on these ready to have courage, ready to speak up and sell the company on why you're a good fit, okay? All right, guys, now last step, the ramp up. Okay, the ramp up is super important. So this is where a lot of sales reps trip, because think about it. We've covered learning and we've covered landing a role. So what's next? Well, you got the skill, you got the job. Now what? People think it's over. People think they won the trophy. But the truth is, most high ticket sales reps quit or get fired within the first 90 days of being in the industry. Okay, and why is that? Well, it's for a couple reasons. Either they quit because of their mindset, okay, or they get fired because they don't make it past the ramp up, okay? So what is a ramp up, right? Well, think about it like this. We talked about how these high-ticket companies do a lot of marketing, okay? They try to get as many leads as possible. And because of that, they're running paid ads and investing in content creation and things like that, okay? So they're paying valuable money, big money, to get book calls on their calendar for guys like you or men and women like you to take these calls. So if you get on this company and your first 30, 60, 90 days, you're closing at 5%, and they're spending $10,000 a month to get a bunch of leads and you're only closing $5,000 in revenue, you're losing that company money because you're not skilled. So during this time is when you really need to lock in. And there's a couple things you need to do. You need to do call reviews. Call reviews are one of the best ways to learn. Really, it comes down to role play and call reviews. Those are the two best ways to learn sales, period. Obviously, same way with role play, do call reviews with the right person. Somebody who's been where you want to go. Don't call review with somebody who's making $5K a month, because you're probably going to learn how to make $5K a month, right? But you're going to want to do call reviews. You're going to want to lock in. You're going to want to show up with the intangibles, because, during this time, let's say your performance is not as good as you'd like it to be, and it's even questionable and the company's thinking about firing you. Well, if you bring the intangibles, like you show up and you're coachable, you're working hard, you're uplifting the entire company, and your performance is suffering a bit, they'll be more patient with you versus if you're a cancer to the culture and your numbers suck, right? It's going to be really easy to fire you. So you got to show up with the right mindset. And for this first 90 days, literally be prepared to give it everything you have to master the high ticket sales process. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to cut it right there. And obviously this was a really quick training because I just wanted to walk you through the process. And in future videos, I'm going to go super in depth into each of these. But as we wrap up here, here's what you need to understand. If you get the right skill sets and you train up the right way and learn from the right person, and you learn how to find, vet, apply, and interview for these great positions and land a great role, and you make it past the ramp up, you make it past that first 30, 90 days without quitting and without getting fired, you are officially in the game. I tell all my students this, right? The most important thing, the hardest part about getting a high ticket sales job is getting into the industry for the first time and building up a track record, right? Because without a track record, it's really hard, okay, to land your first role. But once you land your first role, and let's say you land on an offer and you sell on it for 6 months or a year and you collect 100, 500, $1 million in cash, and you have sales call recordings to show that you know how to execute a high ticket sales call, at that point, you're virtually free to go work for whatever company you want. Now, there's exceptions to that. You don't just get to sell for 1 year, collect a little bit of cash, and then go work for anybody you want, whenever you want. But you have a lot more options, and people are a lot more likely to trust your experience because you already have, reps, data, and a track record, right? So the most important thing, and the reason I put this video together for you, is simple. You need to understand where to get the skills. You need to understand how to get the skills the right way. You need to understand the application and interview process so you can land your first role. And then lastly, you need to understand that there is a ramp up so that you can lock in during that time and maximize your opportunity once you're in the high ticket sales space. So as we wrap up this video, I'm going to mention this once again. If you enjoyed this video, I'm dedicating this new YouTube channel to literally dropping fire for high ticket closers, people looking to get into the industry and people that are maybe already in the industry looking to level up or land a better role. So I'm putting together fire trainings just like this every single week that are going to keep dropping every single week from now on. So if you need anything from me, definitely subscribe, reach out to me, comment below anything you want to see me drop in the future. And lastly, if you'd like to work directly with me so I can help you land your first high ticket sales role and train you up to be a beast closer, then I want you to go below this video into the description, click the link. You can get more information on High Ticket Dominance, my mastermind, and how it works, and also see some case studies from some past students we've helped become really successful in the industry, and check it out. And if you like what you see and you want to join, let's partner up and let's kick ass. But either way, whether you end up working with me and become a paid client, or you just like watching my YouTube videos, I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. So thank you for your time today. Let's crush it. Talk soon.